So when are you able to use the entrapment defense? And in general, it's situations where the police are acting undercover and they get you, they entice you, they push you, they do whatever to get you to commit a crime. And oftentimes, these are not crimes. Again, like according to any definition, they're fake crimes. They are things that have been invented and thought up by the government. And they try to get people to say that they'll do certain things, and they'll push them, they'll even try and pay them money, try and push them with social pressures to get them to say something and admit that they did something or that they will do something, and then they get thrown in jail for a lot of years. And it's something that I disagree with wholeheartedly, but unfortunately it's the law, and there's no sense getting into big arguments over it. But what I'm here to talk about is how do you use that if you get caught up in one of these situations with the government. And there are two things, and there's two things you got to show to be able to use entrapment. And the number one is you got to show inducement by the police officer. And number two, you've got to show that there's a lack of predisposition. And what inducement by the police officer is that they are the person who came up with the crime, and that they're the person who got you to do the crime, or to agree to the crime, or do whatever. It's a very murky area of the law, so I'll try and be as clear as I can about this. But it's kind of silly to me, because the function of police officers is to catch criminals in the act, doing actually bad things or actually harming people. And with a lot of these entrapment cases, the person was not looking to become a criminal. They're not looking to do anything bad, and it's the police who are the actual bad guys in my mind. And they're the people that are trying to put people in prison who didn't even have an intention to do what the police officers are saying that they did. But that's the reality. But the good news is that, well, first I should start out that the entrapment defense is not an easy defense to get. But the good news is that the first part, the inducement part, is a lot easier than what people think. Because in reality, every case you should be able to make an inducement argument, is that the police officers are the ones who came up with the idea and that they pushed you into it. And there's a Minnesota Supreme Court case where it says that anything along the lines of persuasion, pressure, or badgering is enough for you to say the police that they did this persuasion, pressure, or badgering to get you to do this crime, and that should be enough to show inducement. And that's not to say that there have been courts that have said there wasn't this, but in my mind, you should be able to argue this on every case. And in a lot of cases, in most cases, you should be able to argue this successfully, because by definition, that's what entrapment is. But the second prong of proving entrapment, the lack of predisposition, is tougher. And with this, you've got to show that you weren't predisposed for the crime that you're being charged of. So, for example, if you're getting charged with a drug charge and you have a drug and you got convicted 2 years ago, you're not going to be able to use the entrapment defense. No matter how hard the government pushed, you're not going to be able to use it, because they say you are predisposed for the crime to start with. It didn't matter if the government pushed you into it. You had a propensity to get into it anyways. And this can be tough because in a lot of there's a lot of situations where people are trying to make a new life for them. They've made mistakes in the past, and then it's the actual government that is the one that pushes them back in the wrong direction. They might have been sober for 3 years. They might have been on the right track, have a job, not doing any drugs, not doing any alcohol, and then it's the government who gets them to admit and say, hey, I'll buy some of these drugs, I'll sell some of these drugs, and then they go back to prison because they were predisposed, even though they were doing good before the government came in there. So that's the tough thing. But the good news is that there are some cases that can help you out. And one of them is, there's a case where this guy, he had done marijuana back in college. And once he became an adult, once he got out of college, he didn't really do marijuana. He didn't do marijuana for 20 years. He moved to Alaska, he had a whole new life. He came back down to Minnesota, and somebody who knew him, who had gotten in trouble with the government, was told to go and try and entrap him. And he said no multiple times, and then he finally gave in, and he wasn't even going to use the marijuana himself. He was going to sell it. And the government tried to convict him for that crime, but he was able to use the entrapment defense because the court said, okay, something that happened 20 years ago when he was in college, he was having marijuana, that's not predisposition for doing the crime. He wasn't trapped, he was pushed into this by the government. He shouldn't be charged with this crime. So that's the good news, but there have been cases where it's been 6 years, where it's been 9 years since a drug charge had happened, and our district courts have said, nope, and our appellate courts too have said, you're predisposed, even though that happened 9 years ago, you're still predisposed. So you're going up against something tough. What you got to make is an argument. If you are in this situation and you think you have a decent chance of arguing entrapment, is if your past crime is such that it's similar but not the same, you have to drive a wedge between that and your current crime. And I'll give you an example, and this is not a Minnesota case. There isn't a lot of Minnesota cases that have looked at this issue closely, but there's some federal cases where this happened, where you have situations where a person was charged several years ago with a marijuana possession charge, and then the government entraps him into a selling of cocaine. And there's at least one federal case where it said that is enough of a difference, that is not a predisposition. The government entrapped him in this case. So if you have a situation that is like that and you apply it to whatever case you're in, is if you have a past criminal conviction and even criminal charges, and the government has gone so far as they are able to actually, if you have a reputation for this crime, if they're able to call in witnesses there and say that this person does this on a regular basis, this person does this, X, Y, Z, then the government is able to say you have a predisposition for this. So you, with the predisposition, you are facing some tough things, but you want to be able to drive a wedge between your past behavior and whatever you're being charged with, and then you have a chance to actually argue this. And I definitely don't want to give any false impressions that this is easy. The entrapment defense is pretty rare to be able to successfully employed, but it does work. That, and one of the more famous cases is actually John DeLorean. Look that up on the internet. Is that he was actually the guy who invented the DeLorean, was put under criminal charges, and he was able to successfully argue it. So it is something that's possible, it happens, but it's tough to do. So I encourage you, if you're in the situation, that you learn your rights, that you know your rights, and you assert your rights. Thank you.